clear boundaries or border, in other words, an island. Second, the data collected must be robust, reliable, and internationally comparable. Third, the island must have direct flights from the UK, or at the very minimum, transport must be able to take place through quarantine-exempt territories. And fourth, the FCDO travel advice should align as far as practicable. The JBC methodology that I've just described for islands has been developed in consultation with the Chief Medical Officer and Public Health England. This new capability means that we'll now be able to nuance our decisions, first and foremost, to safeguard the health of British citizens, but also to enable British tourists to enjoy trips to islands, even if the mainland is deemed too risky. However, it is worth noting that the policy will not necessarily open up additional islands immediately. For example, when we remove Spain from the travel corridor list, there were 24 cases per 100,000. Today, there are 127 cases, and it remains too high in the Balearic and Canary Islands as well. On the other hand, Greece remains within our travel corridor programme, but our new analysis shows that some of the islands are well outside of the parameters. Indeed, despite overall Greek infection levels being lower than ours, Scotland has already felt compelled to add the entirety of Greece, including the mainland, to the quarantine. However, using our newly acquired JBC data, we're now in a position to remove Greek islands where holidaymakers are at risk of spreading the new infection back home, and 7 Greek islands will therefore be removed from travel list at 4 a.m. on Wednesday, the 9th of September, whilst maintaining mainland Greece.
Well, let's get more on this now from our business correspondent, Theo Leggett. What do you think the travel industry and the aviation industry will make of this?
Well, for a start, the idea of regional travel corridors has been something that the travel industry has wanted since quarantine was first introduced. You might remember that when restrictions were first introduced on travel from Spain, the industry was saying, well, why are the Balearics and the Canary Islands, which are a long way offshore from the Spanish mainland, being subjected to quarantine when the problem is in northern Spain? But the first impact of this change is in fact to increase restrictions, because there will be no relaxation for people travelling from the Balearics or the Canary Islands. Grant Shapps made that very clear in his statement. What we will see is 7 Greek islands, which were not subject to any restrictions, becoming subject to restrictions. And that seems to be the price for allowing Greece to remain having a travel corridor with the UK. So in fact, although this is billed as something which should enable the government at times to relax restrictions to certain areas, specific islands, at the moment it's actually increasing them.
And the other key point, which he was pressed on, the Transport Secretary, was about airport testing, and a lot of people in the travel industry really want to see that at airports.
Yes, testing on arrival as an alternative to quarantine is something the travel industry has been pushing for, again, for some time. In his statement, Mr. Shapps made it clear that this was not something he considered sufficiently reliable, that there would be too many false negatives, people who had the disease but were not testing positive when they passed through the airport. But he did say that testing at airports alongside quarantine arrangements could be more viable. So, for example, testing might enable people to leave quarantine early.
Oh, I'm afraid we've lost Theo Leggett, but we will talk now more about this with Julia Labou-Said, who is Chief Executive at Advantage Travel Partnership, the UK's largest independent travel agent partnership. Can I ask for your reaction to this news that islands from now on can be treated differently, although, as Theo Leggett was just saying, the immediate impact of that is just to increase the number of parts of the world where quarantine applies for, namely those 7 Greek islands?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, I think initially it sounded like positive news, a more nuanced approach, which is something the travel industry has been looking for. But as you say, actually, all it really is doing is adding another level of complexity for consumers and making it very, very difficult for travellers to really understand what they can do and what they can't do. One of the areas that your report also touched on was testing, and that's something that we feel is absolutely vital alongside travel corridors. So you take a travel corridor, a quarantine approach, but you also have a ability to test at the airports, which we believe is much more effective.
I know a lot in the travel industry have complained and been pretty vociferous about the government's quarantine policy, but on the other hand, they will point to those rising infection rates in places like Spain that Grant Shapps referred to in his Commons statement, places like France as well.
The measures that we have at the moment, however, are completely ineffective, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the travel industry, want to ensure that we are working alongside government to maintain public health. That's always top of the priority. However, the measures right now, there is no control, there is no enforcement. There are very reduced restrictions on travellers travelling into the UK, and actually a testing or a double testing would provide a more effective measure to allow travellers to travel and return back to the UK in a much more safer manner with a double testing regime.
I mean, in terms of the travel industry, is it all a little bit too late, whatever happens now? Because essentially, we've had the school holidays, we've had the best bit of the travel summer, if you like, and a lot of business has already been lost.
Oh, you make a really key point. We've already seen close to 40,000 job losses. Around 90,000 job losses are predicted in our supply chain in the UK. And these are businesses that support the overseas market, not the in-destination impact, but the UK impact. So it really is too little too late. However, it's a step in the right direction, and we need to make sure that the government is listening, that is working with us. We're not going to save the summer's gone, unfortunately, but working really closely with the travel industry and the whole supply chain, we're confident that we can work with government to ensure that travellers can travel. And it's not just holidays. There's a very flippant commentary that always comes out from government about overseas travel. The overseas economy supports a significant infrastructure here in the UK, supporting jobs and businesses. And we want to work really closely with government to make sure they can understand how we can put in place the right measures that are really, really important to public health.
Julia, thanks for being with us. Julia Labouie Saeed there, who's Chief Executive of Advantage Travel Partnership. Thank you for your time.